We are back in session, and Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you.
Resolution number 21-530, a reconvening of the final hearing to address the Rybob number 620 watershed drainage improvement petition project.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion, vote.
Vote on motion 21-530. Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Resolution number 21-531, in the matter of approving for a specific occurrence a suspension of Rule 3, speaker registration, Rule 4, limitations, and Rule 7, public comment procedures from the rules governing public comment before the Board of County Commissioners of Delaware County, Ohio.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion, vote.
Vote on motion 21-531. Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here. I think it's very important that we have a good representation of these to make sure that we get a good result for the benefit of everyone. And I was looking over my notes, and I believe this started back in June 14th. That's not correct. It's back in 2014, September 17th. So it's before it, well, it's been a while. I'm going to read the rules, the guidelines that we're going to follow today for the benefit of the process, and then we will begin. The Ryboff number 620 watershed drainage improvement petition project, June 14, 2021. First, welcome to the final hearing for the consideration of this watershed drainage improvement project. There is a sign-in sheet available outside the hearing room today. We ask that you please sign in if you've not already done so. And here's an overview of how we're going to proceed. Copies of the county engineer's report, including a map, were mailed to landowners. There are also copies of the map available today. The county engineer and soil and water conservation districts will cover a presentation on the project. This presentation will include additional maps, current photos, photos of the path of proposed construction, and pictures of similar construction to better illustrate what is being proposed. This presentation will include a sample amortization of a construction assessment to illustrate what an 8-year repayment may look like, an explanation of maintenance, and an illustration of what a percentage of collection really means. Following the presentation, there will be a time for questions from the Board of Commissioners. The board will acknowledge receipt of any exceptions to the assessments or claims for compensation or damages that were filed with the clerk of the Board of County Commissioners. Those speaking for or against the project must be either an owner, as defined in section 6131-01 of the revised code, or an attorney speaking on behalf of an owner. During testimony, you'll be asked to take an oath, and I can't emphasize one of those two have to be criteria, either an owner or an attorney representing an owner. When it is time to offer testimony, we will work our way through the participants, and testimony will continue if new information comes up or additional people wish to speak. After testimony, the board will close the public hearing, or the board may choose to continue the hearing. After listening to testimony and the report of the engineer, the board will decide whether to find in favor of the improvements, affirming the order, confirming the maintenance assessments, and approve the payment schedule, or the board may dismiss the petition by setting aside the order. The board considers the following in their decision: where the board hereby finds that the proposed improvements is necessary, that it will be conducive to the public welfare, and the board also finds that it is reasonably certain that the cost of the proposed improvements will be less than the benefits. So that is the roadmap that we'll be following today. And with that, I believe we will turn it over to Soil and Water.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brett Bacon, Delaware Soil and Water Conservation District. We have a brief presentation on the project and then be happy to answer any questions the board may have. The Ryboff number 620 drainage project was initiated in September 2014 by Stephen L. Sheets and others. The petition asked, commencing in Delaware County, Kingston Township, within the Ryboff number 620 watershed, and generally following but not limited to the course and termini of the existing improvements. Further goes on to ask to generally improve the drainage, both surface and subsurface, to a good and sufficient outlet. It's plugged in. Sorry, technical difficulties. They can't see what my screen.
Okay, I'll make it bigger.
There we go. To generally improve the drainage, both surface and subsurface, to a good and sufficient outlet by replacing, repairing, or altering the existing improvements as required and/or creating new surface and subsurface drainage mains or laterals as requested by this petition. The initial viewing was in December of 2014, and in March of 2015, the petition was amended based on a request by Kingston Township. That request stated to have the east lateral of Main A included in the Ryboff number 620 drainage project now under consideration by the Delaware County Board of Commissioners. The trustees make this amendment request to provide a good and sufficient drainage outlet for the Todd Street Road culvert located within said east lateral of Main A. The trustees believe this inclusion would assist in reducing or eliminating seasonal flooding and in the removal of water conditions that could jeopardize public health, safety, and welfare. The project was then continued to April 30th, 2015, where it was approved by the Board of Commissioners to go to survey and design. The Ryboff watershed is approximately 357 acres, of which 52% is agricultural, 32% is woodlands, 15% rural residential, and 1% road right-of-way. The original petition was signed by 3 distinct landowners representing 7 of the 34 parcels in the watershed. For the purpose of decision-making today, the project has been divided into main, lateral number 1, and lateral number 3. The main will consist of new open channel, approximately 3 to 6 feet deep, open channel restoration, the installation of a grade stabilization structure, a crossing culvert, and a drainage maintenance easement for lateral number 2, shown on the map, which has no construction necessary. We have a drone video starting at the top end of the main, progressing downstream. And this drone video flies over the approximate center line of the project. And this video was flown, all these videos were flown just before Thanksgiving of last year. Lateral number 1 will consist of a 12-inch pipe and a 4-inch pipe extending from the main to the Todd Street Road right-of-way. All existing laterals disturbed by construction would be reconnected to the new pipes, and there would be a flood route easement over the existing surface drainage pathway. This video will start at the top end of lateral number 1, when I can get it started. And it's going to turn and look downstream here. And it will fly from upstream to downstream. Lateral number 3 would consist of subsurface drain installation, surface grading, shaping and grading, grade stabilization structure, and an easement over the existing surface drainage pathway. This video will start at the bottom end of lateral number 3 and fly upstream. Again, over the approximate center line proposed. With some representative pictures of design elements. These are not intended to be exact representations of what the project would look like, but some good post-construction pictures from past projects. This would be an open channel, a grade stabilization structure, a side inlet structure, which is a smaller grade stabilization structure, a grass surface drain swale, a breather on a tile main, and reseeding following construction. Project cost estimate, the main is estimated to cost $112,102.22. That includes construction administration, drainage maintenance pay-in, and contingency. Lateral number 1 is estimated to cost $13,558.80. Of which $7,607 would be direct assessed to Kingston Township for work directly benefiting the road right-of-way, leaving the total assessed to landowners of $5,951.80. Lateral number 3 is estimated to cost $64,098. For the calculation of assessments, the revised code instructs the county engineer to calculate assessments to individual property owners based on the benefits received. The code further goes on to say, quote, lands that have been removed from their natural state by deforestation, cultivation, artificial drainage, urban development, or other man-made causes shall be considered as benefited by an improvement required to dispose of the accelerated flow of water from the uplands. Our assessment formula, basically acres benefited times a land use factor times the percent use equals a parcel assessment factor. The parcel percentage share is determined by the parcel assessment factor divided by the sum of all assessment factors, and the parcel assessment is the percentage share times the total estimated cost. Landowners have up to 30 days after the final hearing to pay an assessment in full. If they choose not to do that, the assessment would go onto their property tax bill as a special assessment. Having it placed as a special assessment would also incur other fees such as the auditor and treasurer's 2% collection fee. An amortization example, basically the average share of the project is 2.9%. That's the total of all assessments minus direct assessments and not including right-of-way, equaling $5,241. When you couple in the debt issuing fees, share, bond interest, raising the total estimated cost to $197,438.10, that produces a $5,725.70 average assessment. 2% of that for auditor treasurer's fees is $114.51, for a total assessment for the average parcel of $5,840.21. Spreading this out over 8 years or 16 semi-annual payments produces a semi-annual payment of $365.01. Bidding and construction. Approved projects are advertised for public bid. The lowest and best bid would be awarded the contract, and these projects are not subject to prevailing wage. Bids may not be accepted in excess of the final hearing engineer's estimate, and the final schedule of assessments is reduced pro rata by the difference between the estimated cost and the final cost. Parcels that would choose to pay up front would receive a refund in this case. ORC 6137 requires projects to be placed onto drainage maintenance. The purpose of maintenance is to keep the project operating its design capacity. Maintenance funds are collected as a special assessment, just like the construction assessment, and common maintenance activities include inspections, seeding, repairs, and erosion control. Maintenance assessments are determined based on the final schedule of construction assessments. Most of our projects average between 2.5% to 5% annual collection. That collection percentage can vary depending on the maintenance needs of the project, and drainage maintenance is perpetual. So going back to our amortization example, our average parcel had an assessment of $5,241. Assuming a 3% maintenance collection plus the auditor treasurer fees, this would produce a $160 annual maintenance assessment. So you can see our average parcel would pay the construction assessment and the maintenance assessment for the first 8 years, and then from that point going forward, just the $80 per half maintenance assessment. Cost benefit. Benefits of drainage improvements exist for both agricultural and residential parcels. The benefit to agricultural parcels is realized by the increased yield as a result of good drainage. Estimated yield increases given the soils in the area would average 46 bushels per acre for corn and 14 bushels per acre for soybeans, given the appropriate drainage improvements are in place. Using USDA average prices from 2017 to 2013, this would produce an average annual benefit, assuming an even split between corn and soybeans, for the 52% or 187 acres of agricultural land in the watershed of $28,392.21. Benefits to residential parcels focus on quality of life, neighborhood perception, and home site sewage treatment systems. A failed home site sewage treatment system can cost $15,000 to $25,000 to repair or replace. New developments average between $1,000 and $3,000 per lot spent on providing adequate drainage outlets. With 20 residential parcels in the watershed, this would equal $20,000 to $60,000 benefit at a minimum. The board has several decision options before it today. You can approve the main lateral 1 and lateral number 3. You can approve the main lateral number 1 and deny lateral 3. You can approve the main and lateral 3 and deny lateral number 1. You can approve the main only and deny both laterals, or you can deny all parts of the project. Approval of any part will require setting repayment period and whether to bond, confirming the schedule of assessments, and ordering the project be advertised for competitive bid. If the decision is to deny, it is recommended to distribute costs incurred to this point to the landowners in the same ratio as determined by the final schedule of assessments. The estimated cost to date for main A, $9,500, lateral number 1, $2,500, and lateral number 3, $7,800. The engineer's recommendation. Based on all of the information gathered and generated, I believe this project as proposed is technically feasible and would serve as an adequate outlet for the drainage needs of the watershed. Furthermore, the parcel assessments for this project are within the range of assessments that can be expected for a project of this scope. The testimony brought to the Board of Commissioners by the landowners as to whether the benefits of this project exceed the cost should be given significant consideration in the decision to move forward with this project.
Thank you very much. Is there any question from my fellow commissioner?
Yeah, I have a question. There's another ditch maintenance petition, Kingston 2017-2. You could just kind of walk through the history of that and what impact that would have on this project.
Sure. The Kingston 2017-2 would be directly adjacent to the Ryboff number 620 watershed. Currently, there are 57 acres from that watershed, which are quote-unquote breaking watershed via the road ditch and entering the Ryboff watershed. That acreage will be removed. Kingston Township has committed to installing a culvert on their own, not as part of a ditch petition process, and that will remove those 57 acres from the Ryboff watershed.
And those 57 are already assumed to be removed in the allocation?
Yes, our assumption, our communication with Kingston Township is that work would be completed either this summer or early next year. So by the time this project would be constructed, those acres would be removed.
And they are removed from the allocation then across?
Yes, sir.
Already?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just want to confirm that.
Commissioner Lewis, have any questions or comments?
No questions?
Thank you, Brett. I have nothing at this time. So we're going to begin, first of all, Jennifer, I believe we have some written testimony that was mailed to us.
We do have some written testimony that has been turned in, just so we acknowledge it. Some of these people may actually be here today. Some of them are older, and a couple were given to me at a more recent date. We have received letters in favor from the Sheets, STV3 LLC, Dale, and Ramos and Lindblom. And we have received letters and information against from Schwartz and Warwick. Those are not any kind of claims or damages, those were just specifically letters that were turned in stating an opinion.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to testimony, and we will proceed in an orderly fashion, and we'll listen to those speaking in favor first, and then those who oppose, and then based on where we head from there, there may be an opportunity for follow-up without being redundant, of course. So as you come forward, we'll ask, one, you introduce yourself, you introduce the lot that you own or you're representing as an attorney, that owner, and then I will give you I'll swear you in, and then you can give your testimony. So with that, anyone who wants to speak in favor of the project, if you'd come forward or raise your hand if there's multiple ones, and I'll recognize one of you. We'll start in the back. Come forward. First of all, your name and the lot that you represent.
Yes, good morning. My name is Stephen L. Sheets, and we have, I don't have the lot numbers, but we have the top end of the watershed and a large section to the west of it.
Okay.
We have, go
Swear
ahead.
you in.
Sure. I'll read all the numbers, okay. Let's see here. I think we have 30, 28, 17, 27, and 11.
Okay, Mr. Sheets, if you raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Proceed.
Okay. The reason for this petition to be filed was to maintain our drainage. We have about 160 or 70 acres of this project, and back in 1980, the drainage had failed. And so we installed new drainage at that time. There was new mains put in for all this area. At that time, the area east of us and south of part of those mains was open farm fields. After that time, the owner at the time planted a lot of trees in there. A lot of those trees were planted right over top of our tile. We have one place that just, the main comes down and have a breather. Right on the other side, a lot of trees planted right over top of it. And this this issue did not just start the other day. This has been going on since 1980. And we've had, at the time, I made efforts to try to talk about getting some improvement done, and each time it just did not go anywhere and was not acted on. I know they was talking about on here about the improvements with the drainage, excuse me. Well, our drainage is in, and what I'm trying to do is prevent damage later on. We have another farm that was on 3B&K Road. It's a similar example. We had a main tile, and there was 4 trees that were allowed to grow up over a period of years, and eventually the roots got into the tile, And when we get those large rains, I think everybody remembers Mother's Day, and then up at our place, our area, just a week ago, we had an inch and a half came in a short period of time, so you get a lot of water. Well, this incident we had on 3B and K, it damaged a lot of their crops. There was 20 acres that was severely damaged, and I estimated the damage that time was about $8,000. Well, it's happened prior to that, several different times. But we did work with another landowner and had a new tile installed, so that problem is going to be improved. But I think the exact same thing is going to happen here. On our one property, it would be property 11. Last fall, we was doing some drainage work, and we had to dig down to the main there, and the roots are already there. The roots are around it. So it's inevitable. The roots are going to get into the tile, and it's going to stop the drainage. The top end of the open ditch, there's a lot of debris, a lot of sandbars, a lot of just everything. That ditch is flat. It does not have a lot of fall. So unfortunately, you can't just put an outlet in and has a lot of fall and it's good forever. This is a flat fall. I think from the head wall back to the upper part, it only falls a little over a foot. So it's pretty flat. So it's got to be maintained periodically. It can't go for 40 years at a time and not have anything done to it. Presently, at time, I have a gentleman that farms our farm, Randy Lineberger, sitting in the back, but he has an equal stake in all this. He plants crops there, and he has a reasonable expectation of a return on planting those, and he probably does not want to sustain losses because of the damage, the drainage has been compromised. So that's his economic input into this. He's a landowner in Delaware County, and like everyone else, he has all the obligations of a landowner. He was good enough to take time to come in support of this project. Really, that's the main thing. The drainage is in there, but we need to maintain it. That's why we're here, because without it, we're definitely going to have a problem another day. And I do encourage your support in it. And again, this land, my wife and I have about 160 or 70 acres of it, so we have the large majority of it. And also, I think we pay one of the sizable assessments. But anyway, I'm still encouraging the project. And I've seen other projects done in the county, not exactly like this. I know it's a wooded area, and I know there's residents there. But it was a few years ago, we did a project on 3B and K Road. It was similar. It was heavily wooded, but the drainage was compromised. And from the road, you couldn't even see where the drainage and things were, but it was damaged. They went in and improved the drainage, and the trees are still there. It has not changed the overall look of the area. However, the drainage was improved for several lot owners. And I'm thinking that this could be a similar outcome at the end of the project. The drainage would be in, it would be improved, but not be a large impact visually or anything else on the property. I know it's hard to imagine, but it amazes me they go in and they can clean a small channel and not do a lot of damage that you can visit. Sure, you got to move some dirt to get the water right. Anyway, thank you for your time, and I encourage your support.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Sheets? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I need to make an announcement. I failed to do this at the beginning. I apologize for that. We have a conflict with one of our commissioners who will have to leave here at 12 o'clock. So the hope is we get this done by 12, but just so everybody knows that and nobody's caught by surprise. And I should have said that at the beginning, and that's my error. So, but I did want to let everybody know. With that, anyone else who wants to speak in favor of the project, please come forward. Your name and the lot that you represent.
My name is Jim Kistner, 8721 Kilbourne Road.
And can you identify the lot? It's easier sometimes for us if we know the,
Parcel number?
Jim,
Yes.
19.
19?
No, it's on this map.
Oh, I'm sorry.
19.
Yep, 19 would be my parcel. Sorry.
okay? With that, Jim, if you'd raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Proceed.
I own that parcel 19, and we're not trying to put new tile in, we're trying to fix what's there. I've owned the property 20-plus years, and every year it's getting worse. The mosquitoes from all the water standing back in your woods, the farm ground. I mean, I can tile that lot, and I can't go anywhere with it. I mean, I have water standing in the woods most of the year because I can't do anything with it without putting a pump station in. I also farm the lot next to it, 33, which is owned by Mr. Lindblom, and that's the same problem. When they flew over, you could see when it got right to the top end of the lateral number 3, the beans were still standing there because the combine was rutting in so deep last fall. I can tile that, whatever I want to do, but I have nowhere to go with it. The tile that's there now is broke, and every year it's getting worse. It used to be 1 out of 6 years I'd have trouble getting in and out. Now I'm lucky 1 out of 8 years to be able to get in and out without, wait till it freezes. So I think this project is needed also because they've lotted off some farm ground on Kilbourne Road along that lateral 3, and they're selling lots off it right now. We get more houses there, there's gonna be more water going back in that area. They need to have a place to take their water. So I am in favor of it, and I hope you see the need of it. More of a health issue to me, is, get rid of the mosquitoes and bugs. And, it's like I said, it's not a new tile. We're trying to fix what was there. And back in, I think, 28 and 1958, the county fixed that tile. But back then, they didn't have the maintenance agreement, so that's why we're in this situation.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Jim? Thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else who'd like to speak in favor of the project, please come forward. Your name and your lot number, please.
My name is Thomas Filbert. I'm at 9197 Todd Street Road, which is parcel number 1 on the map.
If you raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Proceed.
Number 1, I just wanted to state that I am in favor of the project, although it doesn't impact our property very much because we just have a very small piece of property in the watershed. But I have a concern with, and Commissioner Benton brought this up, the 2017-2 project, which is adjacent. We are also in that watershed. My concern is the statement in the final report prepared by, I believe, Soil and Water, states that the 57 acres of the Kingston 2017-2 watershed, which is currently draining into the Rybov 620 via the road ditch on the north side of Todd Street Road. These acres will be addressed by a culvert installation by Kingston Township and will no longer drain into the Rybov 620 watershed. My concern with that statement is that I have had a discussion with the Kingston Township Road Superintendent, and he said, yes, they're going to go ahead and install that culvert. The concern I have is that with just putting the culvert under the road, unless the 2017 project goes through, there's no outlet for that culvert pipe. Original engineering drawings from the 2017 project showed the culvert pipe being set approximately 1.5 to 2 feet deeper than the existing road ditch on either side of Todd Street Road. If they install a culvert pipe and the 2017 project does not get approved, then there is no outlet for that culvert pipe that Kingston Township is going to install, because the ditches now are higher than the Rybov. The ditch on the north side currently flows west to the Rybov. If the culvert pipe has no outlet and the ditch that is currently on the north side of the road continues to slope to the west, there's still no place for that water to go unless it goes into I believe it's lateral number 1. I think the assumption that the water will no longer be flowing that way is based on an assumption that the 2017 project is going to get approved. It's very difficult to get straight answers from the township. This whole project, it's actually 2 separate projects. There's the county engineer, Soil and Water, and Kingston Township are 3 separate political entities. They don't all seem to be working together to solve this problem. It's a multi-watershed issue, and doing work in one watershed won't necessarily fix or guarantee that the other project is also going to work. I just wanted to make that
Tom,
statement.
you are in favor.
I am in favor of the
But you'd like
project.
some-
I
you'd
just
like a
have
little-
some concerns
You'd like a
with.
little clarity, so I'm going to have Brett from Soil and Water come up here and try to address that concern. Fair?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Brett.
So, I'm not exactly sure what the question is.
I'll tell you, I'm gonna give you my layman's perspective, and I may be wrong, Tom, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that if the other watershed is not improved, then there won't be a place for that water to go that's crossing the road. Is that fairly accurate?
And
Okay.
so there is a process through the revised code where if acreage is found to be having benefit of a project that they did not initially pay in, that acreage can be equalized into the watershed of the existing project. So if we would find that in the future, after construction of the Rybov project, if it's approved, the water from the Kingston 2017-2 watershed is still entering the Rybov watershed, then we would look to perform that equalization process. There is a process to deal with that.
Does that answer your concern? You would need to come up here to respond.
I guess my question is for Soil and Water. What is the equalization process involved? Is that increasing the capacity of lateral 1 to accept the additional water from the 57 acres?
So the water, or lateral 1 is designed for the acreage that should be going into lateral 1. It would have the ability to take that extra watershed, but the township would have to put some kind of restriction on it, which we would control.
And that would include increasing the capacity of the ditch on the north. Part of the problem is the ditch on the north side, driveway culverts and things aren't big enough.
That's entirely a township issue. It's their road right-of-way to maintain.
But you feel comfortable that they're aware of the issue?
Yes,
and they will address
absolutely.
it
We have been in, I don't want to say constant communication with the township, but between us, the county engineer's office and Kingston Township, we've had a ever ongoing dialogue about this issue since 2018, basically.
What is the schedule for the 2017 Kingston?
The viewing is tomorrow. The first hearing, Jan 26th?
August 26th or 23rd.
I think it's August 26th.
So I guess as long as we can compel the township to follow through on whatever they may have to do, that's my concern. Nobody here can make the township do anything.
And that would be an accurate statement, but I do think that our experiences, these different entities have record of working well together. So, but well noted. And
Okay.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I've got one question for Brett.
Okay.
Brett, would you just review the contours of the main and then lateral 1 and 3 moving along the map?
Oh, just point them out?
Yeah, just point them out.
Okay.
right.
So the main, I don't, it was so easy to do this on the old screen with a pointer.
Yeah,
The main would be starting at Todd Street Road, just west of parcel number 26, if you find 26.
oh, yeah, maybe we can,
Thank you.
yeah. Oh, great, thank you.
Only problem is she can't see the screen. Maybe I can do it.
We actually can.
Can we? Oh, there, okay, okay, all right. All right, so the main starts here, right at the hand?
Yes, got it.
Okay. Travels down, and ends here at the junction with Little Walnut Creek.
Okay,
Okay. Lateral 1 begins here, down to the main. And then lateral 3 starts here to the junction with the main. Does that help?
so where's 11?
Parcel 11,
Parcel 11?
Right north of
Right here.
Mr. Sheets' parcel,
right there.
yeah. Okay, and is that the main?
The main is here.
Okay, so that is what? Is it lateral what?
The main is the main.
Main is the main.
This is lateral number 1, this is lateral number 3, and this is the main.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay?
No lateral 2, apparently.
Lateral 2 is what we said did not need construction. That is approximately right here.
I got you. Okay.
Okay,
Anything else, Commissioner Lewis?
no, thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak in favor of the project? One last time, is there anyone else here who wishes to speak in favor of the project? Okay. With that, then we'll move to those who are opposed to the project. And same criteria. So who would like to speak? If there is anyone who'd like to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Come forward. Your name and your lot number, please.
My name is Rich Bergall. It's 9032 Todd Street Road. According to this map, it's parcel number 8,
And what's your address for the record?
9032 Todd Street. Excuse me.
Okay? If you're- Okay, if you raise your right hand, I'll swear you in. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Proceed.
Thank you. Were we able to get the PowerPoint presentation on?
Is that what you would?
Right now, we're just talking, we're not talking about exceptions or complaints. We're just talking about, are you supporting the project? Okay, we'll deal with that issue once we get through the testimony.
The PowerPoint presentation contains both discussion about the
Well, we're
project.
trying to keep it clean.
Okay.
So right now, it's
No.
testimony.
Nope,
Okay.
no problem. As you saw by the discussion that was previously had, and Brett put up on here where the mains and the laterals are, there is one lateral that's not on here, although it's included in some of the discussion. That's lateral 2, and it's one that crosses my property. I think he identified that approximately, and I don't know if, there it is. He identified it as someplace in here. There's actually a pair of laterals there. There's the discussion earlier from 5 years ago that said there's a lateral 2, and next to it there's a swale lateral, which I've identified in in another presentation here as a ghost. Those have to be under consideration. They're part of the main. They haven't been touched in a number of years, I understand that. What you're asking in here is to basically redo a main, lateral 3 and lateral 2, which tears up a significant amount of my property. Even in a situation of minimal disturbance. We're talking thousands of feet. We're talking 10 or 12 or 50 feet wide. We're talking about impacting our place to be. We chose to come to Delaware County, to this piece of property 20 years ago because of the property, because of the trees. I'll acknowledge what Mr. Sheets said. The previous owner put a number of trees in there. It really is a nice-looking property. It's a park, for all intents and purposes. What you see here is an attempt to basically go in and amend all of the property that we've got there. Mr. Sheets failed to announce to you or share with you is that this last fall, he also put another set of tiles in. Those tiles in section 11 and some tiles up in section 17. If we indeed had a problem with drainage, which Mr. Sheets again says is not a problem, adding more tiles and draining especially number 11 to the lateral 2, and somewhere out on the south end of the property, and I don't know where those drain tiles dump into, I would suggest to you that someplace on that section, and let's see if I can find again for you, in here, there was a cut into something. That's unidentified. We don't know where he's dumping that water. If it's dumping into 19, 33, 20, 21, then he indeed is adding to the issue of excessive water by putting in those tiles. But again, as he said very clearly early on, he has no skin in this game anymore. He is not farming that. He's now a landlord for that property. And any of the discussions that were made earlier by Brett in terms of his gain financially, he's not getting more bushels. That's not his. He's renting his land. He's leasing his land. And that benefit doesn't go to him anymore. It goes to that farmer out there that is leasing his land. I would strongly urge you to reject tearing up all the property that we have here, that based on Mr. Sheets' own comments, that there is currently no problem, and that this does not bring any benefit at all to me as parcel owner for number 8.
Thank you. Any questions for Richard?
No.
Yeah, a question for Brett. When you do install tile or clear out a swale in a wooded area, what width do you typically?
The easier answer to that is only as wide enough as is necessary. The project has a 75-foot work limit each side. Oftentimes that work limit is spaced at that distance so that we don't have to take down trees. If we have a very narrow work limit and the contractor has to get from point A to point B, they're not permitted to go outside of that work limit. Therefore, if there's a tree in the way, they're going to have to take it down to do their construction activity. With a wider work limit, they can drive around a tree. As far as the installation of a subsurface drain, obviously, about a 15 to 20 foot wide work zone is what's necessary to get that in and to install it from a contractor standpoint. From the open ditch standpoint, we try to only remove trees that are in danger of falling into a channel. Dead and dying trees obviously would be taken down. But if there's large trees on the bank or such that the contractor would work around, I think you saw in my representative picture, that would be a case where we did dig through a wooded area, constructed or reconstructed, I should say, an open channel that had been done many, many years ago. And we were able to leave a lot of the trees on the bank. And that was also one-sided construction, which the majority of this project would be one-sided construction, so we wouldn't be even disturbing the off-bank. For a surface drain that is proposed on lateral number 3, that would be a broader clearing area, approximately 40 to 50 foot clearing with about a 30 foot wide swath permanently grassed.
Okay. Do you have an easement to do, for the main? Do you have an easement now?
You create the easement by your resolution to approve the project per
Right now, you
6131.
don't have an easement.
No, that's what 6131 is all about.
That's what I thought.
I think I know the answer to this question, but sometimes I don't know the answer. I think I know. The tile that Richard was talking about regarding Mr. Sheets, that water's still draining in the same watershed, correct?
Correct.
So it really doesn't, it's kind of irrelevant to the question, I guess. If it's still in the same watershed, it's still got to get addressed.
Correct.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I was reading things correctly. Okay, thank you. Anything else for Brett? Okay, with that, is there anyone else who'd like to speak in opposition to the project? Please come forward. Okay, if you give us your name and your address and your lot number, please.
Sure, my name is Pam Rice. My address is 9112 Todd Street Road, and I believe I'm Lot 9.
And your address again, I didn't get it.
9112 Todd Street.
Thank you. Okay, with that, if you'd raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Proceed.
Okay, so I'm not sure, since you said we're kind of splitting up the conversation, so I guess stop me if I'm getting into something we'll deal with later. So I am opposed to the project. I've had 7 years to contemplate this. My view hasn't really changed. I do think the biggest beneficiary of the project is Sheets Farm. They, as noted in the documentation, there will be a monetary yield. I think from a residential perspective, it can't really be monetized. So there are statements that, better drained land has a higher property value. I've talked to Soil and Water about this multiple times. So I believe there will be drainage improvements. If we did this whole project, there will be drainage improvements. Water will move faster, water will not stand as long, but it will we'll still get flood events. We'll still get flood events annually. So right now, and Mr. Sheets mentioned this, we got like 1.5 inches of rain a couple weeks ago. 1.5 inches of rain, and Soil and Water is free to come up and talk about this. We're still gonna have a flood event. That flood event might move faster. Currently, my water drains in about 24 hours. It might drain in 18 hours, it might drain in 12 hours. But when I sell my land, I have to disclose. It's not like we're not getting any flood events, and I can say, my land is well-drained property, and you won't have any flood events. I have to disclose that. I ethically have to disclose that. So none of us get that benefit of saying we're well-drained land. A farmer probably could. He will, and he laid drain tile last year, he'll lay drain tile every 10 feet across 180 acres he has. Residential owners are not gonna do that. I can't write that off. I can't monetize that. So I will still have, once or twice a year, it might be less, but I'll still have flooding. On principle as well, I feel that the damage, and I would be optimistic if the project goes through, that as few trees would be removed as possible. And I'm actually still optimistic. I put in a statement for $2,500 in compensation.
We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Obviously,
But-
depending where we go with this determines where that's an issue. or not.
So I'm optimistic there will be few trees removed as possible, but the way this is written, 75 feet on either side of the work areas, they can cut. He can say we do as little as possible, but right now, as written, and my lot is the one that has the main going through it and lateral one. And it's all wooded on my land for lateral one. They can clear cut that. They said they're gonna work on one side, it's gonna be my side. They can clear cut that 75 feet over. So there's considerations there. I also have some questions, again, you have to tell me if I have to wait on the answers to these questions, is the main is gonna run parallel with my driveway, where I removed 2 buildings last year in anticipation of putting up a pole barn to replace them. And so I have an outstanding question of whether this, if this goes through, this ditch and the easement that goes along with it will legally prohibit me from putting in my garage on my property, on my driveway.
Thank you. I can't answer that question. And Brad, do you have anything you want to add?
Yes, I've discussed this with Mrs. Rice in the past. The easement where she's questioning would be along the property line, and I don't want to, I'll say, speak on behalf of Kingston Township, but my understanding is that the easement for the project would be contained within the zoning setback for her side lot line, so it would have no impact on future construction on her property.
You can't speak for him, but that's your understanding.
That's as I read the Kingston Township zoning code, which I'm not going to say that I'm interpreting the Kingston Township zoning code. I want to make that pretty clear.
Okay, thank you.
And just to be clear, the answer to his question was based upon, in order for me to get that permit to put in my garage, Soil and Water has to do an assessment. So it's based upon their assessment and their easement that they're putting in, not the township zoning code, because that's mine to deal with. The other question I had was, according to the law, drainage ditches that go in after 7 years can become a public waterway. And so I want to know, if this ditch goes in, will it become a public waterway in the state of Ohio? And what does that mean? So I don't know if there's legal counsel here who can address
Yeah,
that.
I'm not sure. Go ahead, Eric. You got an answer for that?
Sure. If you're asking whether that brings with it additional environmental protection requirements, I can't answer that question. I would guess probably not. Public waterway means that a public water course is a public improvement, and by virtue of the easement, it will be a public improvement. But if you're asking if there are additional requirements that go along with that as a water course in terms of what water can go into it, or whether it would be meeting an EPA definition of a navigable water course, I doubt it, but I can't answer that question because I don't have all of the information in front of me.
Yeah, I guess my question is, does that mean it has public access?
Public access in terms of it being a public improvement.
A
So
public
anybody
waterway.
that abuts it would have access rights to it.
I think I can answer. So, Pam, correct me if I'm misreading your question here. That would be, would this turn the drainage maintenance easement area into like a park that the public would have the right to?
Can someone kayak out?
No,
Can
no.
someone drop off the road, it's a public way, if it's a public waterway, can they walk down it?
Okay, I understand what
Yeah.
what you're asking now. The answer to that is no. It's similar to, think of it like I want to be careful that I don't create a bigger problem here. Anybody who owns land along that public water course has the ability to access it for drainage purposes. That's what, a public water course is a public improvement that somebody can access for drainage purposes. It doesn't mean that they can use it for recreational purposes. It doesn't necessarily mean that there are additional EPA requirements. You know, those are different, that's a different issue.
Okay, that's why I wanted clarification on what it meant to have a public waterway. So at the moment, that concludes my statement.
Thank you. Okay. With that, is there anyone else who wants to speak in opposition?
My name is David Shade. I'm a local attorney, 236 West Central Avenue, Delaware, Ohio. I'm here on behalf of...
Sir,
Could you
could you
speak up?
please
Give us
speak
the mic.
into
Sure,
the mic? Thank you.
Sure. I always have trouble with that. I'm here on behalf of Charles Reffett and Hondros Farms. And their tracks are 21 and 34.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't use for you, my apology. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Proceed. My fault, my mistake.
Let me preface what I was going to say by saying I don't know to what extent parcels 21 and 34 are in the 57 acres that were excluded or are to be excluded from, because they're already included in 27-2.
Hang on, just so we're on the same page, and that is a question, because the answer may address some of your comments. So Brett, do you want to respond to that?
Those parcels were in the Kingston 2017-1 project, which was acted on by the commissioners last week. The Kingston 2017-2 project is up here. So this has no effect.
All right. Well, we attended the hearing last week, indicated that there was sound drainage installed on our track that also was helpful to some of the other tracks. But some of the tracks that are included in this, like 4, 14, 20, possibly 33, we believe will get some benefit from Kingston 27-1 that was heard last week. We are not opposed. This seems like these hearings are a lot like government in general. You're not given the choice to say, I'm yes in part, no in part. We're opposing, but only opposing lateral 3. Lateral 1 and the main, we're not opposed to. And one of the things I would say to you, and this is kind of an aside, I've practiced law in this community for over 40 years, and I can tell you that property owners who rent their land are impacted by the amount of rent they get, which is directly proportionate to whether their land is draining and a number of other factors. So Mr. Sheets does have a dog in the hunt, so to speak. Our reason, excuse me, our reason for objecting to lateral 3 is that we believe that the $64,000 cost significantly outweighs the limited benefit. A lot of the land that will be benefited is heavily wooded. It's not going to increase productivity. We definitely feel that parcels 20, 21, and 34 will not receive any benefit from it, and some of the others will not as well. Not sure how much Mr. Sheets' land will be affected, but our objection is based solely on cost-benefit analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition? Please come forward. Your name, your address, and your lot number, please.
I also provided some written testimony. My name is Marcia McDevitt-Stredney. I live at 8451 Kilbourne Road, and my lot is number 32. I asked that she share the written because I have a bunch of numbers on here, and it's probably easier for you to read them than to follow me.
You have to speak up.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to present testimony in opposition of the RIBO 620 Drainage Improvement Project and acknowledge that had we been paying attention earlier, we would have testified in opposition at the first hearing. Our 3.376 residential acres in this watershed is 80% or more wooded and is land that has not been removed from its natural state as far back as I know of. And I refrain from calling them benefited acres because I believe that is false. Not only because we do not benefit, but I believe this undisturbed wooded area does not qualify as benefited land as defined by the Ohio Revised Code. Our woods are wet in the spring, just as they were when our land was purchased 37 years ago. We knew when we purchased, as all first-generation landowners in this area knew, that it could be wet for short periods of time. We love the land's ecosystem for the biodiversity it supports. Our 3 children grew up exploring the woods and our pond, observing the wildlife, and catching and releasing fish, frogs, and crawdads, and more. Yes, they were bitten by mosquitoes. Ticks are a bigger health concern for us. The rationale of the benefits versus cost analysis for residential property is premised on the belief that we may be placing our homes on the market soon, and that this project will increase our land's marketability. We have no such plan for doing that, and if we were, our place is very marketable right now without this project, and it is highly doubtful that we would make back the cost of the project and its maintenance in a sale. Furthermore, the rationale that it will be beneficial to our home sewage treatment is unfounded. It has been functioning well for 37 years. We have lived on our land, and any potential change in our system in time would be due to its longevity, not drainage. Our land is essentially the farthest away from the main and lateral number 1 proposed drainage projects, and with the exception of Kingston Township, we are paying the highest amount per acre at $2,266.86. In contrast, Mr. Sheets, who filed the petition, will pay in a range of $263.39 to $521.40 per acre for his 5 parcels. He filed the petition and owns, as has been said, 5 out of the 7 parcels represented in the petition. The other 2 petitioners each represent 1 parcel each. The total amount of benefit acres for the petitioners is approximately 187 acres for 7 parcels. Collectively, they will pay $76,203.18. In contrast, the total amount for the remaining landowners, except for Kingston Township, is 775 acres, or 23 parcels. And collectively, we will pay $86,232.29. Essentially, we have 19,632 fewer acres, and as a group, we're paying over 10,000 more for the project. Another way of looking at this is that there are 723 acres of agricultural land use whose owners will pay a collective total of $80,722.82. In contrast, there are 459 of residential acres whose owners will pay a collective total of $81,739.64. According to the benefit versus cost analysis, the 3 petitioners and other agricultural land use owners will see a significant return on the investment for the smaller amount of money they will pay for the projects. But residential owners will pay more and will have little to no benefit or no return on investment. There will be no benefit or land value loss for us. However, some residential landowners will experience loss as their property becomes less marketable after being divided into sections, trees removed, and large areas unusable by the drainage project. Thank you for your time. I urge you to put yourself in our place and consider the financial burden these projects will cause and for no benefit to us. Furthermore, please put yourself in the place of some of our neighbors and imagine your land where you live, a place that you have worked your life to own, being divided and partially destroyed because 3 landowners requested drainage projects to increase their profitability. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition? Please come forward.
Hi there.
Your name?
My name's Keith Schwartz. My address is 8635 Kilbourne Road. My parcel number, I believe, is number 12 on this chart.
Okay. If you raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
My assessment, provided by the good folks at Soil and Water, is for $12,000, $12,205.69 of benefit. and it's my understanding we're here to determine if the benefits outweigh the cost. In my case, I have to report that it does not. Upon receiving this assessment, I contacted Soil and Water, and Brett and coworker came out to visit and walked the area and explained the project to me. The lateral 3 line, which is a very expensive part of the project, terminates on the far side of my neighbor's property. And when I asked the Soil and Water representatives how my water would get up and over the gravel pad which has been created for my neighbor Jimmy, who's a farmer and operating farm operations, has pole barns and silos and equipment, etc. When I asked how my water runoff would get up and over that and to the far side of his property into the lateral 3, I was told there's a common problem throughout the county where we have these very flat areas which doesn't provide proper runoff and drainage, and that not all properties benefit equally from these projects, and that I had the right to come and oppose the project in question here. So, and that's what I'm doing here today. I will say I don't begrudge any of the farmers and agricultural community. It makes perfect sense that you can leverage the tax dollars of the community to make improvements and gain higher yields and more income. But as a property owner, I don't have a way to monetize this benefit. I am the neighbor of property number 32 who just spoke, and most of my water problems exist back in the woods next to hers, and that's been there for many, many years, and that problem actually is outside of the water shed lines put on the map. I have standing water back there and in the front of my property, both outside of this particular watershed, which would not be improved at all. And so I'm opposed.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure to ask the question of, Brett, I'll start with you. Going back to the previous speaker, her comment was this land has been untouched or unimproved, and why should their water standing back in those wooded areas be part of the watershed? Do you have any comment on that?
Well, I would argue that the construction of the house means the land has been changed from virgin timber. I think our office and the engineer's office would be in agreement that all acres in Delaware County would be considered as benefited according to ORC 6131. So that would be my answer to that question.
That was a question I think we needed to get clarification on, so thank you. Anyone else have anything? Okay, I saw another hand back there. I assume you want to speak in opposition?
Well, no, I was just gonna say, if you signed a petition, they would.
You're gonna have to come forward, sir.
If you would have signed the petition, they would run that lateral 3 right to your property line, like they did mine. You were saying the water has to get over my parking lot. Well, if you would have signed the petition, they would have run that lateral across my place to his property line so he could tie into it. That's all I was gonna say.
Okay, I don't think we need to give you, swear you in for that statement, so, Brad, is there anything you want to add to that? I don't think, if you think there's a need to add something?
No, that is correct. The projects are designed to the furthest upstream petitioner.
Okay, very good. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition? Come forward.
Good morning. My name is Eugene Eversole. I live at 8881 Kilbourne Road. The property is number 20. I would just like to say that I oppose this
Wait a
project.
second. I just want to recognize the property. Before you say that, I'm going to swear you in.
20.
Okay, before you make that statement, I'm going to swear you in, sir. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, now you can make your statement.
I'd just like to say that I'm against this project. At the cost that we're going to incur, $10,682.39. We bought this property over 20 years ago. It was a wooded area, and we'd like to keep it the way it was when we bought it. We've had a water issue from day one. We had you guys out when we purchased the property, and there was no issue with the problem that you guys told us then, and now here, 20-plus years later, you want us to charge us all this money, and you say that there's not going to be any way that our land is going to be violated by this project. How can you not violate land if you're going to take trees out, and you say there's no assessment for taking my trees out, and I'm going to benefit 9.82 acres? How?
Okay,
I mean,
any questions or comments? Again, we're just following the law as it's written, and that's our role here, so it's not
Okay.
us, okay?
well, I just wanted to say I oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wants to speak in opposition? I see none. Is there anyone else who has anything else to add that would not be redundant, would like to add at this point? Okay, thank you. I'm going to open it up for comment from my fellow commissioners. We have I guess for a little clarity, Eric, I might ask you to provide a little direction on this. We need to make a decision about where we go on the project, and then at some point we have to talk about the damages that have been requested by a couple of the property owners. How would you suggest we handle this?
Before you make a decision on granting or affirming your order, your previous order, or denying, you would have to make a decision as to the damage claims, because that will impact the schedule of assessments, and it could impact the cost-benefit analysis. So you'll need to, if all testimony is now closed, you'll have to proceed to the part of the hearing where you're considering those damage claims.
Okay. Is there any questions regarding where we are at this point? Okay. Then, as I understand it from our attorney, that we now need to consider those who have cost claims. And Jennifer, who would you suggest we just start? I think there's now,
Yes.
maybe we ought to handle this first. There was a couple that came in after deadline, I understand. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Should we go ahead and get those taken care of perhaps?
Would you like me to clarify what the deadline is that we were talking about, or?
Sure.
Under applicable law in effect at the time of the reconvening of the final hearing on December 3rd, 2020, an exception to the assessments or a claim for compensation or damage must have been filed with the clerk of the Board of Commissioners on or before the fixed date for the final hearing. So that is the date that we are working with. So that would bring us to Mr. Reffert's claim for the letter from Shade and Shade that we will address first.
Okay, so we had two, would you list them by addresses or by some identification, the two that came in?
The
late?
board has it labeled Exhibit CC. It was filed on May 25th of 2021.
Okay, so it's my understanding that those came in after our deadline, or after the deadline, that's by statute. And is there any reason we should consider those? I don't see a reason.
No.
Mr. Benton? Okay. So then we'll limit it to the two that have met the deadline.
I have a resolution I can read.
Go ahead, speak up.
Yeah.
Resolution number 21-532, in the matter of the Delaware County Board of Commissioners rejecting for consideration the exception to the assessments filed by Charlie Ruffett and Honduras Farms LLC for the Rybob number 620 drainage improvement petition project.
So moved.
Second?
Motion made in second, discussion. Anyone want to add? Vote?
Vote on motion 21-532. Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Okay, with that, we have two, I think, that we're going to consider, and Mrs. Rice, perhaps first?
We have.
There was one other, and it was not very clear to us, but Mr. Bergalt had filed a PowerPoint presentation, and to a certain extent, it went back over his claim for damages, which was previously filed before the deadline. And so, for good measure, if that were to be considered a claim, it would have also been filed late. Now, the one that was filed back in December, that was timely filed. But the one that was filed, if we want to call it a claim, with the PowerPoint presentation, you would also have to address that, so that we would just be dealing with the claims that were filed back before the final hearing.
And we have a resolution for that as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Resolution number 21-533, in the matter of the Delaware County Board of Commissioners rejecting for consideration the claim for damages filed by Rich and Joyce Bergalt for the Rybob number 620 drainage improvement petition project.
So moved.
Second, I still have some questions we can address.
Okay, well, discussion, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the one that was filed, if we want to call the PowerPoint presentation that was submitted a new claim. I'm not sure whether it was actually a new claim or just kind of going over all the same information, but just for good measure, I want to make sure that we address that. The claim that was filed back in December would still be up for consideration.
Okay, that's what I
So
want
we're-
to clarify.
Yeah.
You understand that?
I understand.
Okay. Call for vote?
Vote on motion 21-533. Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Okay, with that, I think we'll handle Mrs. Rice's first. So,
The first thing we're going to do is acknowledge receipt of it.
okay.
Resolution number 21-534. In the matter of the Delaware County Board of Commissioners accepting for consideration the claim for damages filed by Pam and John Rice for the Rybob number 620 drainage improvement petition project.
So moved.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Eric, she's been sworn in earlier. Is it necessary to swear in again?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Currently, we are just acknowledging receipt.
This is just to acknowledge this.
Okay, we have to vote on that.
Vote on motion 21-534. Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
And we do not need to swear you in again, is my understanding. So come forward, and you have a request to state your claim for damages?
I submitted a claim for $2,500 in compensation to compensate for a minimum of 50 trees that will be cut down as a result of just the main.
Okay. I'm going to ask Chris Bossman to come forward, and Chris, I believe you're here to address those claim requests.
both are. You have those queued up. No, we just have them printed.
So our analysis of these projects and it's based on an important point that needs to come out and be considered, probably in your consideration of whether you move forward with the project as well, is that I think you saw from the previous report, this has a history going back to the 1940s. A project was built and established as a petition project by the county commissioners. But at that time, the Ohio law did not provide for an assessment for maintenance to maintain those improvements in perpetuity the way it is today. The law changed in 1957. And so the projects that we maintain today
by a maintenance assessment all have had a redo or newly initiated since 1957. So I look at this project as simply reestablishing the project that was built in, I believe it's 1948, yes. The plans are still on file in our office that show the alignment of that improvement, and they show the depth of the improvement of the cross-section. So the drainage features that you saw in the aerial photographs and the drone footage follow the alignment and construction that was done in 1948. And so the reason we're here is because there was not maintenance of that project in that period of time. And things have happened on that project, largely through no fault of anybody here in this room, but over time have regressed to a point where they no longer function the way that they once did. And so when we're evaluating these claims, we're distinguishing between reestablishing the existing drainage, and if the work that's being done is to to reestablish what was done in 1948, in my opinion, which is what's asked of me in these issues, is that there should not be damages awarded for simply reestablishing the drainage that was built previously as a public project and not maintained over that period of time. So I'm not recommending damages being awarded for any of the work that falls within the limits of that original project. Now, with all that said, on the Rice project and the Rice claim, we actually are realigning that channel and that drainage improvement through their property, largely to minimize the impact on their property, but nevertheless, it does go outside of the limits of the original project. And so my recommendation would be that we grant the claim. Our basis for evaluating the claim and substantiating the claim for damages is the work that we're doing beyond the limits of what was originally built under the 1948 project. And in this case, there are limits out there. There are limits that go beyond what was originally constructed. And so I'm recommending that $2,500 claim, $2,650, be granted. And I will also tell you that we did not go identify each tree, but we have looked at the property. We think it's a reasonable claim, and we could spend more time in surveying and have it rack up a higher cost than what the actual claim for damages is. And so I'm willing to recommend accepting that claim, and we would recalculate the assessments to represent that as a project cost if your board decides you want to move ahead with the project.
Any questions for Mr. Bossman?
No, I think it's a reasonable reading and reasonable approach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rice, I think you just heard that he supports your...
I did. I have a question, though, because he kept referring to the 1948 work done. Does that 1948 work place any legal obligations on me to not plant trees on my own property? I'm aware of no easements. There's no legal easement on my
I'm going to let him
property.
answer that question, but we're here to talk about your claim.
I know, but he just happens
It's up to
to,
him to answer the question. Excuse me.
I'm not familiar with the 1948 proceedings. I'd have to review them.
But the purpose of our, right now, is to address your claim.
Okay.
Okay? Okay?
Commissioner, I did want to remind you, we talked about this last week, and I failed to remind you, when the engineer or soil and water is providing testimony in regard to a claim, he should be sworn in. When they're performing their statutory duties in terms of a report, it's not necessary.
So how would you suggest we proceed?
And just have Mr. Bowsman come up and be sworn that his testimony that he's already provided is under oath.
Okay.
Yes.
I wish I'd done that earlier. Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, proceed.
And I would say for the record that my previous testimony prior to being sworn in can be accepted as my sworn testimony at this point.
And that's acceptable?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We've heard the testimony regarding Ms. Rice's property. Do Do we go ahead and address it?
I think you should,
Yeah, I
because
think we
if there
should.
need to be
Yeah.
additional changes to the
Yeah, I
assessment,
just
you'd
wanted
like to know
to
that.
confirm what
now.
I thought I knew.
Yeah.
Okay, just so we don't go wrong direction.
So you wish me to read the resolution to allow the.
Correct.
Resolution number 21-535, in the matter of allowing the claim for damages filed by Pam Rice and John Rice for the Rybob number 620 Drainage Improvement Petition Project.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made in second, discussion? Vote?
Vote on motion 21-535. Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Now, before we go further, just want to make a comment. This may seem a little convoluted, but there's a lot of different elements we're putting together. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, so please understand, we know what we're doing. We're just trying to do it in a way that's efficient and makes sense for you and for us, and make sure that we're following rules that we need to follow. So with that, we need to read the resolution for the next one, the acceptance? Or the, oh,
Accepting for consideration,
Right.
they've not done that yet.
Correct.
right.
Resolution number 21-536, in the matter of the Delaware County Board of Commissioners accepting for consideration the claim for damages filed by Rich and Joyce Begalt for the Rybob number 620 Drainage Improvement Petition Project.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made in second, discussion? Vote?
Vote on motion 21-536. Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mr. Boston, I'm going to ask you, do you have anything to add from your previous testimony, or you think you pretty well covered it all?
On this claim?
This,
Yes.
this is a different one.
You want to give?
Yeah, come on forward. I do not need to swear him in again.
He's already under oath.
So the same analysis applies to this claim as I explained in the previous claim. I have provided you with some images that show, that might be helpful, that show the kind of a time-lapsed image of, or picture of what's taken place. Moving to the photograph that's here on the screen is a 1951 aerial photograph of the area, and you'll note from the report, if you kind of look at those two by comparison, the difference in the property, and clearly the difference in the land use at that time. And the yellow, the translucent highlighted yellow line on this exhibit, we placed on there over the top of the existing alignment that's there, and that is the alignment of the original 1948 improvement, and it's the alignment of what we're showing today. So that's 1951, 1957, 1964, 1971, still relatively unchanged. 1980, 1988, this is an infrared, the reason for the color on this is an infrared photo that Soil and Water had access to. You start to see some trees start to show in this image. In 1997, you see tree and brush vegetation much more pronounced. 2002, more so. Again, 2006, 2008, 2010, 2013, 15, and 19. So, I don't show these photographs to cast any opinions on whether what's happened is appropriate or not appropriate. It's
Every property owner certainly has the right to use their property as they see fit. And so there's nothing wrong or improper that's occurred by these photographs, but it does help inform my opinion about the original improvement and the limits of that improvement and the question that's before us. And so all the work that's proposed on the Bergolt property as part of this Rybov 620 project will be conducted within the existing corridor and along the existing drainage improvement. And so I'm not recommending that any damages be awarded because we're simply reestablishing the limits of the scope and depth and alignment of the property that was built in 1948. And so it's different than the previous claim where we were realigning the improvements across that property. We're not doing that in this case. And so I'm not recommending that damages be awarded.
Any questions for Mr. Butler? No. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
You come forward, you have any information you want to share? And you've already been sworn in.
Appreciate that.
Do you want me to pull up your old one, or do you want me to pull up the new one?
You can pull up the old one, doesn't matter. As long as it scrolls. We're good. Appreciate it. First of all, I'd like to make a request. The information that was provided by the engineer just now, that's the first time we've heard it. Would certainly appreciate copies of that. I saw a presentation or a statement on there that was shown on the board.
It's certainly public record, and we'll make a copy available before you leave.
And I certainly appreciate that. I'm not going to go through the old presentation, which, Ms. Lewis, you saw 5+ years ago. And I assume you have had the opportunity to see that presentation, or at least look through the slides, since there is no video capture of that in your commissioner records. Unless I present some of that to you, it's as though it didn't exist. So if you bear with me on that. But again, I'll try to be as pointed as I can be. And again, it's approximately 34 slides that I'm going to scroll and just pick off some pieces for you. We spent time supplying for you information about fencing, about culverts, about what I'd call bridge replacement. This is referred to in the new discussions as a crossing area. I personally paid for culverts. I personally paid for some of that stuff to go in. This is all being turned over to whoever bids this project as their property, as part of their payment. I don't find that as something that's appropriate. Since I paid for it first, I expect that back in my pocket. That's material. It's not some discussion about land. There's some fencing issues. We've been talking about clearly in the engineer's project documents, removal of some of that fencing and placing it back in place. Assuming no damage to that fencing. If there's damage, it has a cost factor to me, since I paid for that original fencing, be it vinyl, be it electric. And again, there's some numbers in there that you can take a look at. The pond relocation new build, as far as I can tell with the new engineering's drawings that were given to us a few years back, if you don't drain my pond, there's no impact. However, when you put in the ditch my culvert cover to get me from one piece of property to the next, you're going to tear some of my land up. On that land is a windmill. If you tear into that land, you're going to move my windmill. I don't know what you're going to do with the windmill. Again, my numbers, my money out of my pocket originally. All of this was run through in the preliminary estimated cost of having 0 damages to my property. You can't grant someone money for taking some trees down on their property and say you can't do that for me. You can't give Ms. Rice, who I thoroughly respect, money for trees when I've got trees too that are coming down. I've had some of those trees assessed, and there's big money there. I didn't plant the original trees on this property. The previous owner did. But 20 years ago, I bought the property because of the trees, because it was a forest. And if this would scroll faster, I'd certainly get there quicker, but sorry about that.
You're doing fine, you're doing fine.
I believe there's a couple of issues that are talked about in terms of favorables. I understand benefits versus cost. I understand the discussion of property value, of getting more dollars for crops. I understand that, and I hear that very well. What it doesn't do for me, though, is address my issue of what happens to my property. If you take trees down, maybe there's some monies that should be there. Cost for trees, I've got some trees that are worth $1,000 a piece just standing right now. I've got a forest that's slowly maturing. Each of those issues, each of those chunks of property have a future value. When the engineers and water and soil people valued the gains to Sheets properties, they ran it out over 20 years. When they looked at potential damages, they were 0, and they never considered a 20-year runout. That's ludicrous. That's truly ludicrous. If there is indeed any damage ongoing, it's not just for 1 year. It's for year after year after year. And like you've heard from several of these people, we bought this land because of what it was, not of what it might become. Let me see if I can be a little bit more specific and a little bit more clear. This is, again, scrolling as fast as we can.
You're doing fine, don't feel pressure.
I think there's some things that need to be pointed out today. I think some of what you need to hear deal with changes over the last nearly 7 years since the initial petition was filed. You heard me allude to the fact that Mr. Sheets no longer farms that. He is now a landowner who leases his property out to be farmed. That wasn't happening 7 years ago. It only happened in the last 2 years. I think that changes some of the potential intent. There is a large, and I'm going to ignore this, just put it on as cleanly as I can. There were a large number of questions that have been asked over the years for information out of the engineer's office and out of the soil and water. And in a meeting they had with us on our property back in the 20th of May last year, got some tremendous answers. Tremendous work in terms of, can I graze this property? Do I lose it? Do I lose my fencing? We did a lot of things to clean that up. We actually talked about and took pictures of stuff that would be to my benefit. I understand that. However, there are still a number of issues that are open. I saw pictures today, for instance, showing where the main has been for, quote, years. When asked if that would become a permanent easement, the response I got was, I don't know. Well, that's important, because if it's a permanent easement, that permanent easement comes off of the tax value of my property. You lose income as commissioners on that value. But I can't balance that. I don't know what that is. So I've got to go back and tell you right now that if I look at the engineer's drawings with a 75-foot either side of the improvements, that's 75 feet running with the laterals and the main on my property take 20% of my property away from me. That's crazy. That's crazy. I can't narrow that. They will tell you that I should narrow that because it'll be, permanent easement won't be that wide. But I don't know if permanent easement is. If that permanent easement is 1 foot, you're taking property from me. That's damages. No question in my mind. One of the things that happened since this petition was filed, and again, I respect Pam and her husband, they built a pond, a huge pond. I'm told that between the spoils and the pond, the footprint of that lateral 1, will not change. That's still going to go where it was proposed. I'm not sure that's right, but I haven't seen any change in the engineer's drawings. If there's a change in that footprint, if it has to move, then that means a new set of drawings, and it means this hearing is continued by statute. And you have pictures of the spoils and stuff like that, and I'd certainly point them out to you if I could, but you can't quite see what I'm looking at in terms of a pointer of some kind. The other piece that I think needs to be talked about is, and I mentioned it briefly, is the additional drainage tile that were put in by Mr. Sheets. This wasn't the original tile back 20 years ago. This was a new set put in the last year. In anticipation, I believe, that you're going to approve this project, because it in fact does put more water into lateral 2. And it in fact does put more water into the south end of, I believe it's the large property to my west. Why do I believe it's done that way? Because I talked to, or why do I believe that is anticipating you guys passing this? Because I had a communication with Mr. Crowell from Kingston Township as he was repairing the front part of my property, roadway, about a week and a half ago, who said, hey, you know all those Puco markings in my particular road, Todd Street? Consolidated has put some fiber in for fiber internet. Tremendous. And they marked the roads because of that. Mr. Crowell, however, believed that that was marked in anticipation of approval of the Rybov project. Now, he said he'd take that up with you as commissioners, because I objected to that. And I don't know if he has or not. But he seemed to think that this is preordained. And that's bothersome for me.
Well, just to comment, nothing's preordained. That's the reason we're here. There's been no conversation with this commissioner, and I assume that my fellow commissioners. And Soil and Water certainly wouldn't be in a position to make that judgment either, so.
Sure. And it's
just want to clarify.
No.
And I understand, and I certainly appreciate the clarification. It's just disappointing that Mr. Crowell somehow has that in his mind, that this is already done. And I know there's nobody here that can speak to Mr.
I
Crowell's.
think Brett wants to say something, but once you finish, then
I'll
go
step
ahead, Brett.
aside.
Come on.
I can just comment on, from the Soil and Water District aspect, nobody from Soil and Water District has requested a utilities protection marking in that area. So I don't know what the markings were for, was not done at our request.
Thank you.
No, clearly it was done because Consolidated was putting in fiber, and they were running from pole to pole, so they had to do some markings. We previously, I believe, talked about one of the Kingston, I believe it's 20171, that's been approved. I believe it was approved last week. 2017-2, you know, what's the impact of that on this particular project? And I understand from previous discussion that question is somewhat answered. So, let me give you a clear set of numbers, so there's no question. Of course, as I said before, I reject the issue of crops as being a guideline. Damages in terms of my property, in terms of the pond, approximately $25,000. Fencing's both vinyl and electric, approximately $13,500. The existing bridge, I had over $5,000 in that project already. We have loss of business, loss of access to grazing, in excess of $19,000 there. There's a 3.5 century-old tree, 85-inch in diameter. It's about $8,500. It's interesting to note, to me at least, that it's acknowledged that the engineer would try to go around that particular tree. And my wife and I were certainly excited about not disturbing that tree. However, when they marked it on the engineering drawings, they put it in the wrong place. In fact, it's off by probably 400 or 500 feet. But I guess I'm supposed to believe that what's going on there works. One time, $52,000, repeating $51,000 for over 20 years. Again, if you can tell me that the project is worth something positive to Mr. Sheets, and you take that over 20 years, then any damage to my property has to go out over 20 years too. My wife pointed out clearly that I don't know how to spell the word priceless, but the one piece that you've heard from just about everyone that's come up here today, and we want to reemphasize it, is that the quality of life that we look at, whether it's our grandkids, whether it's our kids, there's no price on that you can put. I've got a pond, I've got a stream, I've got a lot of trees. My kids like being there, so do my grandkids. You can't go in and tear me up. Say you can't get to some of your property because I'm going to put a swale through here, so how do I get through the swale? There's nothing in the engineering report that says how do I get through the swale. So we stand tight on our issue of damages. The next slides just update those all a little bit. I'm not going to certainly walk you through that. With respect, we believe our damages are fair, timely, and appropriate. Would ask reconsideration that you accept them as presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Brett, anything you want to add or based on what the testimony just heard? Mr. Bossman, anything you want to add?
You should swear him in as well.
Absolutely.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Proceed. Thank you, Eric.
I'll just point out that many of the items that Mr. Bergault points out on his claim for damages, such as the culvert, the fencing, the windmill in the pond would not be disturbed by the project. The fencing is marked on the engineering plans as removal for reuse, so that would be a project cost to replace that. There'd be no damages incurred, and the same for the culvert. The plans would call for the culvert to be replaced at a grade consistent with the proposed grade of the open channel, and thus would not be a damage. There'd be no cost to Mr. Bergault other than his share of the assessment to have that replaced.
Fencing would be returned to the original fencing he currently has?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Would anything prevent access to all previously accessible parts of the property?
No.
So the swale doesn't prevent?
No. The swale is constructed would be a crossable swale, would be crossed in the same manner that it's crossed now.
Replacing anything else that was mentioned, what is the obligation? Maybe it's Eric too, under the law?
So the problem that I have is, as I responded to Mrs. Rice, I have not reviewed the 1948 proceedings. So I can't tell you that there was no easement established. There was reference made to changes in the law in 1957. What that change entailed, I mean, there were many changes, but pertinent to the claim, there was a difference before 1957 between maintenance obligations. Absent some agreement from the county, those improvements pre-1957 were to be maintained by the abutting property owners.
Okay.
And I believe that's what Mr. Bauserman was talking about when he said that, when he referred to a corridor not being maintained. Because before 1957, the obligation would have been on the abutting property owners to maintain that drainage system. But I cannot tell you that there was no easement established because I've not reviewed that. It was not such a case that before 1957, there was no drainage easement established. It would have just been a non-funded county ditch. But there could have been an easement established. I'd have to review the records to provide an opinion on whether an easement existed or not. I think that's a pivotal question that I don't have an answer for you today. And so if you need an answer to that question, you will have to continue the hearing to receive an opinion on that.
So you're saying the importance of the easement is that another entity other than the property owner, whoever has that easement then has the responsibility of keeping that corridor?
What I'm talking about with maintenance is, under current law,
Maintained.
as of 1957, there's an obligation for a maintenance easement to be established, and it is maintained in accordance with Chapter 6137 of the Revised Code. That's what happened from 1957 to the present day. Nothing has really materially changed that, even with the recent changes in drainage laws. That's still an obligation on the county to establish a maintenance easement, collect assessments to provide for that maintenance. Before 1957, I'm not telling you that there were no easements prior to that.
Okay.
But I would have to review the 1948 proceedings if that's something if that's information that you need in order to make your decision. And where that might be pertinent is any land acquisition or taking of improvements within what has been referred to as the original drainage corridor. If it's actually an easement, then I understand what the testimony from the engineer is talking about, and that you're not going beyond that, we'll call it an easement. Whether it exists or not is the question.
I have a question based on this comment made with Mr. Burkall. He said if the easement had been there, his property taxes should have been reduced accordingly. Is that, and I guess the question number two is, if that's true, do the taxes he's been paying reflect that or not? You may not be able to answer that at this moment.
I think I might be able to answer that one, Eric. Projects done under 6131, the code would stipulate that the area of permanent sod that is stipulated or required post-construction, that area gets reported to the county auditor, and that acreage, that area is reduced or taken off the taxable acreage of the parcel. That wouldn't be the case on any of the properties in this watershed because it hasn't been done post-1957. There is no permanently maintained area of sod. I think does that answer your question?
That will be true going forward?
Correct, yes, the
And
law
then
stipulates.
theoretically, there would be an adjustment?
Yes, the law stipulates that we do that.
Just trying to clarify for the benefit of everyone. Okay. I think what I'm hearing from Eric, please don't be bashful about correcting me. If we have some questions, you need a little time to evaluate them, and perhaps we need to recess to a future date?
If you want an opinion on whether an easement exists across this property, I would request that you continue this hearing, not for the purpose of changing the assessments yet, because you would just be continuing for the purpose of this specific claim for damages.
But this affects the assessments.
If you were to rule that
Right.
a
It
portion,
theoretically could.
I mean, you have the ability to allow the claim, to deny the claim, or to allow the claim in part, not in full. I mean, you have all of that available to you, and if you are not prepared to make a decision because you need more information, continue the hearing for the purposes of this claim for damages before you order changes to the assessments to be made.
Okay. My fellow commissioners, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. I think there's still a lot of questions linked to
Yeah.
the easement. What are the real damages? Some of them may be real, some of them aren't. So, yeah, I think that's my immediate concern is I've just still got a lot of questions.
Yeah, that is my concern too, that we still have too many unanswered questions, and I want to make sure we get this right.
So to continue the hearing, do we have a time we have to wait, or it can be done 30, is there a time, do we have to
I have
re-alert
a
all the
date
property
picked.
Uh, You don't have to provide notification if you're continuing this hearing for the
Okay.
purposes of the claim for damages.
Just
So
that
the
one
qu-
issue.
You have
So
to
the question is, how
continue
much time
to,
do you need for your evaluation?
At least 2 weeks.
I'm
given
gonna
my
add a
other-
week just precautionary, so,
I all know that you're available on August 5th.
August 5th?
Yes.
Okay, that's about 7 weeks, but that's the earliest that you think would work?
All
As a
three of
question.
you are here, yes.
Yeah, we've got, right, we have the
Yes.
Lake of the Woods,
Yes.
and then, yeah.
And we got some hearings scheduled.
So, Eric, are you good with August 7th?
That's more than 2 weeks.
Well, you might, if you're on vacation, it would matter.
I'm not gone August 5th.
Okay.
Re- Resolution number 21-538, setting date and time for the continuation of the final public hearing for consideration of the Rybob number 620 Drainage Improvement Petition Project to Thursday, August 5th, 2021 at 11 a.m.
So moved.
Second,
Motion made in second, discussion?
so this is, again, just that one issue, damage claim.
That's right, and so you have already adopted a resolution allowing the claim submitted by the Rices.
Right.
And that includes the engineer, in order to the engineer to redo the assessments. I think we can hold that in abeyance until we've ruled on all of the claims, because it doesn't make any sense for them to redo the schedule of assessments if there's another change.
And we don't know if there will be or not, that's the purpose of. Okay, any other comments, discussion? Vote?
Vote on motion 21-538. Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Okay, with that,
Do I close the, I don't close?
we don't close the hearing.
We don't close the hearing, correct?
So,
Okay, that's
You
it.
just continued it to August
there-
5th.
I'm gonna take, you have a question. Is it appropriate to have a serious question?
Steve Sheets, again, I've already been sworn in. There was some mention about a drainage project we had had in December of '20. That project was planned more than a year prior to that. It was back in May of '19 that was established. To get a drainage contractor, anyone in, you have to plan out a year ahead. And these hearings was scheduled back in June of '20 and December of '20, and they were put off for, I understand, and they were. But this project was planned way before that. Initially, the drainage was put in at 50-foot intervals. That's what a lot of people did in the 80s and 90s. We went back in a small area, put some in between, so they're 25 foot apart. There has been hundreds, if not thousands of acres in the last 10 years in Delaware County that people have done that. The drainage in the 80s and 90s, 50 foot was okay. Today, it's not. And they're moving them spacing in. I've seen a lot of projects that are put in now that are 30 and 40 foot initially. As far as adding water to it, you get an area, whatever size you want to look at, 50 acres or 100, and an inch of water falls on that. There's only an inch of water is going to fall off of that, run off of that area. It does not make hardly any impact if it's 50 or 25 foot apart or whatever. It's the same amount of water that's going to go off. It's the tile's been in for 30 years or more, and it need to be updated as like any other improvement.
Appreciate you, understand, we're only recessing to determine where these claims have value.
I understand that, but the idea was brought up that because of this, that there was anticipation from me and other things, there was not. But also, these things were scheduled to be over more than a year ago, and this project was planned back in May of 19. And I've talked to many people before I ever did this that are drainage people, and they said, that's ridiculous. Putting the tile 25 foot apart instead of 50 does not change the amount of water that's going to be off. It does not put more damage. It does not impact anything.
I believe the Soil and Water's testimony supports that.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that,
We're
the
finished.
hearing's been continued, yes, until the date.
August 5th at
August 5th.
11 o'clock here in this building.
11 o'clock?
Yes, 11 o'clock.
Okay, 11 o'clock, August 5th.
For the
Thank you.
purpose of evaluating the request.
Okay.
Okay, with that,
I'm assuming that the board doesn't have time for executive session on an unrelated matter?
he has to go. Can we
Alright,
do it?
then
Do we need all three of us there, or?
Yes,
Can-
it's a litigation matter. I don't know if I'm going to be here on Thursday because it's the litigation matter that's scheduled for Thursday, so,
Will it,
Can you do it with the two of us?
no.
oh,
So,
can you,
Can
He's
we-
got 5 minutes. Will that be sufficient?
okay.
Eric?
um,
We'll make it,
Let's
it'll
make
work
it
well,
work,
so.
yeah.
I guess we need to go in executive session.
Yeah.
Resolution number 21-539, in the matter of adjourning into executive session for consideration of pending or imminent litigation.
Second?
Motion made and seconded, discussion, vote.
Vote on motion 21-539. Mrs. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye. We're now in executive session. Thank you, everyone.